Hi, I'm Dr. Faranak Kamangar, and welcome to the Future of Dermatology podcast. We're here to talk about the real science behind skin, the medical breakthroughs, the cosmetic innovations, and everything in between. Hello, we are here with Dr. Jerome Potozkin, who is a dual board certified dermatologist and micrographic surgeon. And Dr. Potozkin is well known to our community because he's so involved with CalDerm and all the amazing things that he does. And he saved lidocaine buffering for us. And you do so much for our society. But the main thing we wanted to talk about is how incredibly successful you are in private practice and how we can learn from that. And so Dr. Potozkin is the founder, medical director of Potozkin and Ellis Dermatology and Aesthetics. And your practice, I believe, was founded in 1998 and boasts something like way over 10,000 visits a year, I believe. And you're serving patients from all over the country. And it's sort of in a setting where most of the residents pretty much come out and don't necessarily look at private practice as much as they look at other settings or multi-specialty clinics. So from someone who's doing private practice so well, would love to just hear your experience from when you did in 1998. Would you do the same if you were to come out of residency today? And if so, or not even residency, maybe mid-career, at any point making the switch, the learnings and everything that you learned. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And the funny thing is, I am so fortunate and blessed to have an amazing practice, love what I do, love managing the practice, but it was not a straight path, and it was a very bumpy road to begin with. So I came out to California to do my Mohs surgery fellowship in 1993. And when I finished my fellowship, I had the opportunity to join one of the practices that one of my fellowship directors was running. And I was working in two different practices. And 2 years in, one of the practices called me up and said that was going to be my last month there.
Wow.
And I was devastated. The practice had two offices. The owner went on vacation. The office manager fired half the staff, shut down one of the offices. And it was like, what? This is not what I expected graduating from medical school, finishing my residency, finishing my fellowship. I thought I was done. So then I was working in another practice. I planned on purchasing that practice. The last thing I wanted to do was start from scratch. But the person I was working with was somewhat stringing me along, which is not unheard of in dermatology. And I came to realize that I was not going to be purchasing that practice. So it was time to go to the bank and get a loan to pile onto my student loan debt. And I started in a very small office with 2 employees, and it was extremely stressful. I opened my office 2 days after my first date with my wife. And I think for the first 5 years of our marriage, I was just worrying nonstop. And that was with 2 employees, a small office. Now we have 40 employees, 4 dermatologists, and a partridge in a pear tree.
That's amazing. I mean, that's got to be so stressful to have that just pulled under you. That's like unheard of. They just closed it down. That's just poor business.
I really felt like the rug was pulled out from underneath me. And we think of going into a career in medicine. We never think anything like that would happen. Right? We go into it for stability. Right? We're not going to hit it out of the park and be billionaires, but we're going to be just fine. But that was a big, painful learning experience. Yeah. But what doesn't kill us does make us stronger. And one of my favorite stories is a Zen parable of the do you know the Zen parable of the farmer?
No,
the farmer's tale. So
yeah.
This is a good one for the residents out there who think you have to get it right off the bat. So the farmer's tale is such that there was a farmer in an old Chinese village, and one day his prized horse escaped out of the pen and ran away. And all the villagers came by and said, "Oh my God, this is horrible. This is the worst thing that could happen." And he shrugs and says, "Maybe." And then 3 days later, his horse comes back with 5 wild horses. All the villagers come around like, "Oh, you're so lucky. This is the best thing that could happen." And he shrugs his shoulders, says, "Maybe." And then his son, his able-bodied son, who does all the work around the farm, is riding one of the horses to break it, gets thrown off, breaks his leg, and of course, all the villagers come around and say, "Oh my God, this is so horrible." And he shrugs his shoulders and says, "Maybe." And then the next week, the army comes by and they take all of the able-bodied men, they end up going off to war and they get slaughtered.
Yeah.
So the moral of the story is sometimes something that seems horrible turns into something much better.
Yeah. And the reverse too. I mean, I think kind of making the parallel of, we talked about security, which is one of the reasons a lot of people go into these more secure settings of like a very multi-specialty clinic or larger setting, where allegedly more secure, but
right.
it's kind of like, is it? Maybe, like exactly what you say is it's not always exactly what you think or expect. So that's actually really interesting to kind of think about it that way, is you just never know what the next step is, and things are happening for a reason.
And I think, right now, probably private practice medicine is somewhat of a dying breed, maybe. But I think it's the best practice setting.
Yeah.
I think there's nothing better than being your own boss, doing things the way you want. As physicians, we tend to be perfectionists, especially dermatologists, because you have to be pretty bright to get into dermatology. So it's usually kind of the OCD types amongst us. I'm sure some people can relate to that. So it is really nice. And, there are certainly always problems, but they're your problems.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, autonomy, control, those are things that are priceless when you look at everything. And then one of the bigger things is, so there's the security, then there's of course financial. So bigger groups have better reimbursement rates. And so it sounds like you guys do medical and cosmetics, right? You guys also take insurance and all of that.
We do take insurance. My practice is 70% cosmetic.
Okay.
And then I also do Mohs surgery as well, with some small amount of general derm. But the thing is, you can do elective procedures, right? So that isn't where a third-party payer dictates what your fee is. And you mentioned that, some of the large groups can negotiate better rates, but the business model of insurance-based medicine is a completely broken model.
Yes.
Because in that model, the customer tells you what you're going to charge for your services or what you're going to receive. What store can you walk into and tell them what you're going to pay them?
Right.
The other thing is that the deck is really stacked against dermatologists, because it's illegal for individual dermatology practices to get together and discuss it's illegal to even discuss what your fee schedule is with a colleague.
Oh, interesting.
Unless you're part of a same legal entity. So you have no bargaining power with any of these big groups. And I think that is a big problem.
Yeah, it's a lot to navigate. And are you guys part of any like independent physicians group, or do you have any opinions on if you're going out to, or is it just regional, kind of figuring out what's best?
So I think if the advice I would give for someone going out, I would actually not contract with any insurance companies.
Interesting.
Except maybe Medicare.
Okay.
And I would focus on delivering the best patient experience that I possibly could. I would model my practice on the Ritz-Carlton. And there are so many people that are fed up with going to a doctor's office where they feel like no one knows them, where there's huge staff turnover. And I think if you go primary care doctors are doing concierge medicine where they're taking fewer patients. So I think that if you can go to an area where you can set your fee schedule and work the way you want to, that would be ideal. Now, it would be extremely challenging to do that in a saturated community where all the other dermatologists take insurance. I know this might get me in trouble, but I think that a lot of the private equity-based practices start looking at cutting costs, and that usually equates to personnel. And that's what really makes the patient experience suffer.
Right.
So I think that if you focus on the patient experience, your best bet is if you can dictate what your fee is, not an insurance company.
That's true. And it's getting worse and worse. The insurance reimbursement rates are going lower, and that's a losing battle.
Yeah. But it takes a special person who's willing to do that. You have to, most physicians are not risk takers. You have to be willing to take that risk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, any other advice? Let's say you're leaving private practice, residency, or maybe mid-career, making the move, anything like should you start out from scratch? Should you go buy a practice? Any other advice you have in general when you're, or any pitfalls of situations not to fall into when you're looking at private practice?
So I think if you're a young person and you want to go into private practice, the ideal scenario is to find an older dermatologist who has a practice that can support another dermatologist, or someone who is older and kind of wants to retire at some point. And then have the practice evaluated, pay a fair amount for that practice, and then you can mold that to be whatever you want it to be. Or you can be, a crazy person like some of us and start from scratch on our own, which is extremely stressful.
And it's good to know that actually works too. Like that actually
That
works
works,
too.
yeah.
I don't think we've ever seen any other dermatologists in any models where it hasn't worked out for them. So.
Yeah, I'm unaware of dermatology practices, startup practices going under. That may be the case, but I think we probably would have heard about it in like Dermatology Times and all those journals. But I think that, it's not easy. It will take you longer, particularly if I started my practice in Danville, California. It's not like a desert of dermatologists and plastic surgeons. So it took a good 5 years before I really felt like I had a lot of momentum.
Yeah. So it definitely takes some time. And then let's say someone is going and joining an established practice, any guidance on how to write that contract so you're not being strung along, or is that not really a contract-based thing? It's really just the person and the relationship that you have.
I think it's two things. So when I graduated from my fellowship, I was a complete idiot because my fellowship director hired me on a handshake. And then when I got my first paycheck, it was a fraction of what I thought I would agree to.
Wow.
I think that contracts are important to protect parties, but at the end of the day, it's the person who you're dealing with. So I think that for anyone graduating, it's very important. The person being hired is not writing the contract. The person hiring is going to present you with a contract. And don't go to the board certified dermatology Facebook group asking for legal advice. Invest in an attorney to read the contract who deals with these things and will let you know what's customary and what's somewhat outlandish in a contract.
Yeah, but that's a great point. Actually, what ancillary services do you recommend? So maybe an attorney, should you almost get a consulting firm? Like what outside business tools are there that can be helpful? Because some of the skill sets of the business and all of that we don't necessarily have, or maybe the billing, credentialing. Like what are helpful outside people to have involved in your team?
So I had a phenomenal practice consultant who, can I mention her name?
Of course,
okay.
yeah.
So Deborah Farris of Practice and Liability Consultants, she helped me with the initial practice evaluation where I thought I was going to buy a practice, and then she helped me start from scratch. And she's helped me every step of the way in terms of growing my practice. A month before COVID, I had a crazy office manager situation. She recruited a new office manager for me that started 3 weeks before COVID shut us down.
Wow.
I think that a practice consultant is very helpful if it's a good one. You definitely need an attorney. You need a good CPA, and good people cost money.
Yeah. So that's another part to maybe like budget into everything that.
And then another thing is very helpful. If you're going to contract with insurance companies, hire someone to do the credentialing for you, because that is something you will want to pull your hair out of your head.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, one of those like tedious things to do.
That is a key thing. I think a lot of the insurance companies, they drag their feet processing these applications to credential new physicians because the less physicians out there, the less people to pay, and they don't want to pay out money.
Yeah.
So when we hired new practitioners into our practice, new dermatologists, it took one of the big companies, 10 months to credential her.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's it. And then actually another thing that came up on a prior episode was that some insurers don't take, we're at capacity and they won't take another dermatologist.
Some say
and
they're closed.
That was hard to understand, but maybe this is the reason, is they just don't want to open up another whole account to have to deal with, basically.
Exactly. But again, like the farmer's tale, right? That may be a good thing. That may be an insurance carrier that you don't want to contract with because their rates are so low, and they will open up, your panel for people that do.
Yeah.
And the cash pay practice, that is the model, I think, for future success.
Yes, because
Or
insurance
some, or
is
some
getting
type of
complicated.
hybrid. I think that is the model for success. And we see a lot of patients in my office that cash pay, that have insurance through a major HMO in the state of California, that will not let patients schedule appointments with dermatologists.
Wow.
They have to go through multiple hoops. They have to see their primary care doctor, who then takes a picture, sends it to the dermatologist. I had a 58-year-old gentleman in my office this week, a redhead, high risk of skin cancer, family history of melanoma. He can't get an appointment for a skin cancer screening.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's just bad care.
That's bad care.
That's not doing the best thing for that patient. And then the last thing I have to ask you about is you were so involved with CalDerm and all that. How important do you think that is for younger people and all the other derms coming out to get involved with our medical societies, CalDerm and all the different societies? Everyone's listening from different parts of around the United States, but how important is that piece? The doctors kind of stick together, and
I think it's super important. I think that it helps for networking. It helps for business development. It helps with respect with CalDerm. We do a ton of legislative advocacy. Just this year, we had to have a conference call with some of our plastic surgery colleagues who were going to introduce a bill that required you to do any cosmetic procedure in an accredited setting. You couldn't do it in a regular office.
Wow.
And you had to have ACGME training in whatever procedure you were doing. And that was ridiculous, and I pointed out to them that their ACGME does not include lasers, it does not include injectables, which a lot of them either do or supervise in their practices. And we were able to, through our legislative advocacy, nip that in the bud before it even got into bill form. And those are things that a lot of dermatologists aren't even aware that CalDerm is doing, but that would have had a huge impact on our practices.
Yeah,
Thanks for asking that, by the way.
No, it's amazing, all the work that the group does. And like you mentioned, people might not necessarily know all the work, that advocacy work that's being done.
We're like the virus protection software on your computer running in the background. Exactly.
That's like the perfect place to put it. But thank you so much. This has been so helpful. Any last minute things that we missed, or any last piece of advice that?
Yes. If you are smart enough to get through medical school and get a dermatology residency, you do not have to worry about career success. You're going to do fine regardless. You have to tune out all the naysayers. People love to complain. If you have to work for a living, there's nothing better than being a dermatologist. And as you can see, all the other physician specialties wish they were and try to make believe they're dermatologists.
That's true. I mean, I agree. And anyone in any setting we talk to is pretty happy being a dermatologist. I mean, there's slight differences and preferences, but it's really great. And all the innovation we have in our field, and it's just getting better and better. I think it's a great time. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For
Appreciate
taking
it.
the time and
anytime
mentoring everyone and all the work you're doing with CalDerm. So thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thanks for joining us today on the Future of Dermatology podcast. If you enjoyed learning about the science behind skin, make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time. As a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only, not for medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider.